Hi, my name is Bryon Draper. I live in Provo, Utah. I'm a sculpture professor at the Brigham Young University. I grew up in Cardston, Alberta, Canada, and I came down here about 15 years ago and got my master's degree here at BYU. And then I went back home to Canada, and a couple of years after I got back home to Canada, the university called me, the sculpture department called me and asked me if I would come down and take on a job here teaching sculpture. I teach, my primary job is to teach the figure sculpture class, which I really enjoy. That's my favorite class by far. You can probably tell I like the figure just because I use it constantly in my work. I enjoy teaching students. I love their energy, the new fresh energy that comes each semester as students come into your class. And I love being able to work with them and find out what their ideas and help them to create and make these ideas become a reality for them. And I find that really enjoyable to do. Another thing I like about being able to teach at a university is the opportunity to actually create my own work, give them time to produce and carry on as an active profession. I've been a sculptor for 11 years, and I do stone and bronze sculptures for the most part. I combine stone and bronze together because I like the feeling of antiquity in my pieces. A lot of times I reference poses from antiquity because they have a certain meaning in the pose that I like, that I want to mesh or contrast with contemporary life, contemporary ideas and feelings. And so I create a combination of the two and try to mesh those two together. I usually start with an idea or a stone, and sometimes I use the stone to get the idea, and I will, if I do not have an idea that I start out with, I'll go around and I'll just look at interesting stones until I find one that I like, that I think that will work in a certain way that I find interesting, and then I will start working from there, just building on that. I seldom do sketches. If I do sketches of a piece, it never comes out the same way I make the sketch. So lately I haven't really been making sketches unless I'm trying to save an idea, and then I use that idea, but the pieces always evolve as I'm working on them. And I like that idea of being free to work on the piece and change things as it's evolving along. And even after it's finished, I like have the viewer to have that same feeling of being able to be free to move around with ideas in the piece. To me, they're never really finished. The viewer always has their own ideas that they can combine and put in with the ideas that I've put into the sculpture to come up with their own meaning of the piece. I find my stones, they're native stones to Utah for the most part. I go hiking around in the mountains. Sometimes I take my family and just make a day of it. I try to stay away from bright, flashy stones. I like them to be very earth-toned. Most of them are gray. Some of them tend to have a little bit of color in them, but I don't really like bright, flashy stones. I love to leave traces and history in the stone. I don't like to cut it all out. Sometimes I'll go out of my way to leave little bits of moss hanging on them, minerals showing on them. And then when I chip the shell off the bronze, I'll leave traces of the shell on the bronze quite often. Just the shell material is the white mold material on the bronze. And I'll leave it on purpose because I think it goes really well with that history aspect of the stone and the white mineral and stuff like that on the stone that I find really intriguing. I also find it very intriguing to try to line up events in history, or ideas more, I guess, in history that mesh with or compete against the ideologies which we have today. Sometimes I will add objects into the piece, but usually they're nude and not very many objects added into the piece. I think it's kind of the challenge, trying to make it feel without giving so much information. I have made pieces with objects in them, and they're more suggestions of possible meaning. I don't really put them in there to direct a viewer to one particular focused meaning, but it's just little suggestions to kind of head the viewer down a certain path that I was thinking, but I like to leave it open enough that they can head off that path and go where they want with it. Some people have asked me, why are they bald? And that's an interesting question. It's not that I don't like hair. I have been teased a lot about my hair, but I really do quite like hair. And to me, the sculptures are kind of self-portraits anyway. And so it's kind of an interesting thing that I have this bushy hair and I'm doing bald sculptures. And I think the reason I do it is because hair seems to be able to be identified in a place and time more than just the human body in and of itself. And so I think I eliminate the hair just to kind of make the sculpture feel a little bit more timeless instead of giving it setting its time in Rome or Greece or even contemporary type hairdos in them. I like to work in a real busy environment where I have all my pieces readily at my hand, so I can just pick them up at any time that I want and use them. A lot of people kind of think it looks messy, but like my wife, but I feel like it's just a working environment. So I can have everything the way I want when I want it. I can have things immediately close at hand. I often name my pieces according to what I'm thinking about the piece at the time, and sometimes I have an idea that I want to create in a piece, and I go ahead with that idea, and the piece usually follows with the name after that. The title of some of my pieces, I don't even title them until after the piece is finished, and I look at the piece and I sit it on my desk and I look at it for a couple weeks even sometimes, and I get a feel for what I'm feeling from that piece and what it reminds me of and how I feel. So I kind of work two ways that way. Sometimes I already have that feeling and I create a piece that's kind of down that line. And then other times I need time to figure out what I was doing with that piece, why I made the piece the way I did. To me, the pieces really aren't about any one particular thing. They're more of a general spiritual connection, I think, with humans to nature, with humans to their past and their history as human beings. So I don't really prescribe any particular meaning to a piece. I want the viewer to choose for themselves what they would like to come up with as far as a meaning for the piece. They do have some meanings to me that they're quite personal, that I don't share with the viewing audience. And so I think for me, I think the real drive as far as creating the piece is developing the meaning that I feel in a three-dimensional object. My name is Bryon Draper, and I am a sculptor.